Hey friends, welcome to the show. Today on the show we have a great guest. His name is Trevor Kouritzin. He's a chemical engineer. He's pursuing currently his doctorate in nutrition. He's a natural professional bodybuilder, an international model, and a cancer survivor. Truly a renaissance man, and we're glad to have him. Please enjoy and welcome Trevor Kouritzin. Hey Trevor, so it's good to have you on the podcast. Where did you get that name, Canadian Chemist?
So that was actually a joke from Tony. So whenever I'm in Sacramento, for whatever reason, Tony thinks it's so funny that I'm Canadian, right? So everywhere he goes, he says that's Canadian Trevor. And we'll even be at like Costco, and he'll just be like introducing me to like the person checking us out at Costco, and they'll be like, "This is my friend from Canada. This is Canadian Trevor." And everyone thinks it's so funny. I don't know why. There's an ongoing joke that I'm French Canadian. I'm not French Canadian. I took a little bit of French in high school, but I guess like you guys in the United States, like you guys kind of think Canadians are funny. You guys like Canadians, so I mean, there's worse things to be called. Canada is very similar to the U.S. Like we have Costco in Canada, we have Walmart in Canada.
Right.
And then the Canadian Chemist was kind of just like a cool pen name, because the problem I have is my last name Kouritzin. No one really knows how to spell it or pronounce it, so Tony was like, "We need to give you a pen name that's easy to remember." So he kind of came up with Canadian Chemist. I thought it was kind of funny. I was like, "Sure, we can work with that."
How are you? Where's that last name from? Are you Canadian in background or?
So my grandparents are Russian and German, so half Russian, half German. My last name actually means son of a chicken in Russian. So as long as they don't have any kids, I'm good to go.
Gotcha. Okay, so with that name, chemist, as I said, I already know that you're a chemical engineer. Are you going for your doctorate now in that same field? Is that correct?
I'm actually doing my doctorate in nutrition.
Oh, nutrition. Okay.
Yeah, so I like the chemical engineering because I'm really interested in hormones and organic chemistry, and I'm really interested. So like, I remember being 15 and someone would say, don't eat this carb, it's a bad carb, right? Like don't eat sugar, it's a bad carb, but eat sweet potatoes because they're a good carb. And I was like, but like, can you explain that to me? And no one could, right? Now I understand, it's the difference between, one's a polysaccharide chain of glucose molecules and one's, individual glucose molecules. But I was so fascinated that, someone would say this fat is bad and that fat is bad, but then I would ask them like, well, explain to me like why is that fat bad? And they would just say it's bad or it's good, or I'd be like, well, what is protein? No one could really explain that to me. So I really wanted to understand the chemistry, and then also hormones are a big part, because I got into bodybuilding very young. Like I started working out when I was 13. Actually, my first weightlifting show I was 15, and then all of these magazines, and this was close to 15 years ago. And as you remember, 15 years ago, there weren't really forums or anything like that. It was all magazines.
Right.
So I read these magazines, and it'd be like, do this workout to maximize growth hormone and testosterone. And I'd be like, what are these hormones? How do these hormones work? So I really wanted to go to university and study this stuff and understand how you can optimize your hormones. And then a lot of these hormones that are labeled bad hormones, like estrogen, are actually essential, right? Like without estrogen, you can't sensitize the androgen receptor. And then, insulin, people view insulin as bad, but insulin actually has a lot of good. And like without insulin, you'd be dead. And that's why a type 1 diabetic needs insulin to live. So it was really fascinating for me. But then with where I'm at and with what I'm really interested in, nutrition and using nutrition to optimize performance or optimize health or optimize well-being really fascinates me. So I'm doing my doctorate in nutrition and focusing even more specifically on supplements. Okay. Because with how it is right now, I feel it's very hard to get everything you need through diet alone. With modern agricultural processes, we're not rotating crops, so our soils are extremely depleted of minerals. What we're feeding animals is just crap. Like it's really depressing when you actually look at what we're doing to agriculture. So where we are now, and especially fast forward 20 years, I think supplements are going to be necessary just to live.
From agriculture aspect, are you thinking more that a lot of emphasis is put on quantity and not so much quality? Is that kind of what you're thinking of? They're trying to
Well,
mass
food's
produce.
food's a business now, right? So like, fast forward like 50 years ago, these were small independent farms, right? The farm would have a couple cows, maybe 20 chickens, and it would grow all its own produce. It would only make enough to feed, 50 people. But now it's all mass scale and it's just quantity, quantity, quantity. And you can't even blame the farmers because now all of these things are commodity stocks, which basically means they're paid by weight, right?
Right.
So if the going price of chicken is $3 a pound, and they want to feed that chicken barley, oats, and alfalfa, they won't be able to sell their chicken at the price it's going for. So they have to feed their chicken corn and soybean. A lot of these farmers know what they're doing is terrible for the environment. They know what they're doing is terrible for the animals, but they're kind of like, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place because if I feed them what they should be fed, I'm going to lose money selling it at the current commodity price. And
Right.
then you try to get into, being like a farmer who sells this stuff at the farmer's market or things like that. But it's really tough. A lot of people don't support local farmers and farmers markets and things like
Sure.
that.
Sure. Yeah,
So
it seems like there's like a system, and once I mean, it's very hard to break out of that system because I mean, if you're a farmer, you really have no options but just to continue the cycle. So that's kind of like what it appears to be. So as a chemical engineer, day in day out, what do you do? I know you just earlier today you said you were working on some blood serums, and some blood analysis. So what is your job like day in day out as a chemical engineer?
So I work for two supplement companies. I work for Enhanced Athlete, obviously with Tony, and I also
Right.
work for Tech Nutrition. So I use my chemical engineering degree to formulate their products
Hmm.
because when it comes to formulating products, you have to make the products that are synergistic. So a great analogy would be like, let's say you went to the grocery store and you picked cinnamon, oregano, black pepper, and cayenne pepper, right? All of those are really, really great spices. Like cayenne's got a lot of health benefits, cinnamon's got a lot of health benefits. But if you put them all together, it tastes terrible, right? And the same thing with supplements. You have to make sure these ingredients that you're putting in it work synergistically and work by the same pathways. And then also, when it comes to formulating supplements, the hardest part is actually the flavor and mixability because certain compounds are hydrophobic, certain compounds are hydrophilic. So certain compounds like water, certain compounds don't like water. And there's nothing worse than you make a shake, and then 2 minutes later, half of it sinks to the bottom and half of it's still mixed. And then flavor is always a huge issue, right? Because everyone has different
Sure.
palates. Some people like sweet, some people don't like too sweet. So that's mainly what I do. And then also always looking at the research, right? And looking at what's new, what's exciting. Just because something works, can we make it work even better? And the supplement industry is very versatile, right? What's hot one year is no longer hot, right? Like paleo was really hot, and now everyone wants collagen, they want greens, they want MCT oil and things like that. So you constantly always got to be evolving your products and developing new products. So that's what I do from a business standpoint is I do all the product write-ups, all the product formulations, all the product development for those two companies. And then I'm also doing graduate studies. So my thesis is on cardiovascular health, and I'm studying natural dietary alternatives to blood pressure and cholesterol medications. So what I'm doing, so basically for my clinical trials, I took people who were at risk of developing a cardiovascular disease. Cardiovascular diseases are things like heart attack, stroke, things like that. So basically they were at high risk. So they would have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, whatever. There was a huge eligibility criteria. And then I would give them this dietary supplement concoction I made for 90 days and then test them again to see if their cardiovascular risk factors, things like their blood pressure, their cholesterol levels, how much plaque is in their arteries, even simple things like their waist circumference, their BMI, things like that, if those improved. So that's kind of where I'm at is like, we know that pharmaceuticals work, but the problem with pharmaceuticals is that they're not addressing the problem, they're addressing the symptom, right? So if you
Right.
have high blood pressure, that's a symptom, that's not a disease. What that doctor should be doing is saying, here's a high blood pressure medication. Your blood pressure is dangerously high, so I want you to take this because you're at high risk for developing a heart attack. But why do you have such high blood pressure? What does your diet look like? Are you exercising? How much stress is in your life? How much sleep are you getting? That's the conversation it should have, right? Not just, here's your medication, come back in 6 months for a refill. So I'm of the opinion that most of these diseases we have in North America, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, whatever disease you want to talk about, you can fix through diet and lifestyle interventions, and also supplements. So with
you mentioned.
Go ahead.
You mentioned in North America. Is that something that is not commonly seen in other places? Is that common for only people in North America? High blood pressure, heart disease.
Cardiovascular diseases are the #1 killer worldwide, but it's particularly prominent in North America. The reason it's becoming even more prominent worldwide is that they're adopting our American lifestyles, right?
I see.
So I was actually in China. My dad's a professor. So when I was 15, my dad was in a conference in China, and he brought me and my sister, which was pretty cool. That's one of the cool things about being a university professor is you can travel around the world doing conferences.
Yeah, I bet.
Like that. But I remember being in China and seeing the parents who would stick to their traditional Chinese way of eating. They were all super thin, right? They all looked very healthy. Their skin looked good. They were thin. And their children who were eating the North American food, the KFC and McDonald's, were obese. And it was almost like these two people didn't belong together. Like if that mom and the daughter weren't holding hands, you would have never guessed it was that person's kid, because it was like this healthy, nice-looking woman and this obese child. I was like, what is going on? But that's because the kids, they watch TV, they see the ads for McDonald's and KFC and Pizza Hut, and they want that.
Sure.
Whereas the parents are, more accustomed to their traditional Chinese way of eating. And it's really sad. If you look at all of the developing countries, their rates of obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease are all expanding linearly. So we know what the problem is, and we're kind of just spreading it worldwide.
Yeah, that's terrible. I mean, now the places that didn't have those issues are having them now. I mean, that's a horrible situation to be in if you're them. And there's really, I mean, can you do anything about that? I guess there's not. I mean, it's globalization.
At the end of the day, we're all in charge of what we put in our mouths, right? So I guess it would just be education and kind of explaining to people what good food is. But that's the problem. Like, most of the people listening to this podcast are extremely educated, so they know what healthy food is. But I'm often booked to give conferences at grocery stores and things like that. And I always get questions, oh, I thought natural meant healthy. Oh, I thought organic meant healthy. Right? So these people are putting these granola bars that say natural in their shopping cart, thinking that they're healthy. Like they're really trying to make an effort. But if you read the granola bar, the first ingredient is corn syrup. Yeah. And that's how food companies will trick you, right? Is they'll put gluten-free on a bag of potato chips. And then people are like, oh, it's gluten-free, it's healthy. Gluten-free doesn't mean it's healthy. Natural doesn't mean it's healthy. Organic doesn't mean it's healthy. But that's how the food companies try to trick you. It's just like when sugar was when fat was the enemy, right? It would say fat-free. So people would be eating these, basically like Pop-Tarts, which are like pure sugar, going, oh, it's fat-free, it's good for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's common with like the same concept of having people think about muscle. When you have something, they always emphasize protein. So in anything that's always emphasized, oh, this has 30 grams of protein, but you look on the back and it might have 45 grams, 50 grams of sugar with it, and nobody really looks at that. So I guess it would be the same kind of concept, just kind of tricking, using the market, to trick people.
And then generally they're using the cheapest protein source available, right? So probably like soy protein or something like that.
Right. So you also you mentioned a little earlier that you're a professional bodybuilder. Can you kind of talk about that? When did you get your pro card?
So I have a natural pro card. Don't anyone listen to this podcast don't think I'm a 300-pound monster. I have very good parents. My dad is like a very supportive father, but my dad's one of those strict military fathers, right? So when I was 18, he said, "You're your own man. It's time for you to fend for yourself," and he basically kicked me out. So I needed to find a way to make money to put myself through school, right? Luckily, I had a lot of scholarships, so tuition was mostly paid for. But then you've got rent, and you've got food, and you've got living. It adds up quick, right? Especially when you got like cell phone bill, internet bill.
Right.
You know what I mean? These are things, most 18-year-olds don't think about until they're actually paying for their own bills. So I needed a way to make money while I was in university. And I basically got scouted, because when it comes to modeling, they really want you to have certain dimensions, right? Like I'm 6'2", I have a 44-inch chest, I have a 30-inch waist, I have a size 11 shoe size. Like I literally check all the boxes of what they want for modeling. And then also I had like the strong cheekbones because I have that European background, and the blonde hair and blue eyes. So I basically got scouted. So when I was at the gym, one of the guys who works out there, his wife owned a modeling agency. So he kind of like told his wife about me, and his wife was like, would you ever be interested in modeling? At first I thought it was stupid. I'm like, I don't want to, like, no, that's silly. Like, I'm not interested. But then when she told me about how much money I could make, I was like, well, maybe you sparked my interest. So I got into modeling. My real passion was always bodybuilding, but I kind of did them both synergistically, and there was a lot of overlap. And then for modeling, they want you skinny jacked. It's kind of like the term I like to use, is that they want you to have, like a nice chest, a nice six pack. But they don't want you to be so muscular that it's intimidating, right? It wants to be something that, like the average person would look at and be like, I like that, like that's aesthetic. Almost like men's physique. But this was before men's physique existed. So I really wanted to pursue bodybuilding, but the problem was if I pursued real bodybuilding, I couldn't model because I'd be way too muscular. So I was like, what can I do? So then I got in the natural bodybuilding route, because with the natural bodybuilding route, you're still muscular, but you're not like a big 300-pound monster, right? Like I was competing at around 200 pounds, which for someone 6'2" isn't that big, right? So that's where I got into it. The modeling was not something I really enjoyed. I actually really hated it. It's very boring. If you could imagine someone taking photos of you for 8 hours, it makes you want to rip your hair out. But it was good money, and it was just like a part-time thing for me. I had no desire to be America's Next Top Model or anything like that. But I just did that to make money while I was in university. And then the bodybuilding, I've always loved bodybuilding. I've always loved weightlifting, and just myself being like a very goal-driven person, I like the competition aspect of it. Because if you're just going to the gym every day, like it almost gets repetitive. But if you have a goal to work towards, it creates drive and initiative and excitement. So that's why I got into natural bodybuilding. After winning my natural bodybuilding pro card, I haven't competed since. So I kind of like had that goal, checked it off. Eventually, I would like to try to win an IFBB pro card, but that'll probably be once I'm done my PhD. Me and my girlfriend are planning on starting a family pretty soon. So, get married, have kids, finish my PhD, and then hop on a bunch of drugs and try to win my IFBB.
So, I mean, but if you do something like men's physique, could you do that naturally, or you don't think so?
With how competitive it is, man, you have to do something. You're using at least some orals. I mean, those men's physique guys now they're jacked, like they're juiced up.
So it's interesting because when I was watching your interview with Dave Palumbo, and it was a very good one if anybody gets a chance to go hear it, do so. But you were talking about SARMs. Would that be like a good route to go, or that's not going to get you to a place where you need to be?
SARMs are very, very effective. If you're using injectable SARMs, I think you could do it. The problem with SARMs is there's no androgenic properties. And when you run a really androgenic steroid like Winstrol, it really dries out your physique and it gives you that hard look. Like these are terms that's really hard to like quantify, but anyone who's ever used these drugs knows what I'm saying. So I think you could use SARMs to get the physique you need, but I think you'd have to use something like Winstrol the last couple of weeks just to give you that look. And then also you'd have to use things like diuretics and things like that. So you wouldn't be able to just use SARMs. But I think SARMs would be able to get you like 95% of the way.
Sure. And SARMs are now like they're kind of in that gray market where they're not, FDA necessarily approved for use, but they're being tested. Is that correct?
So SARMs are still being sold as research chemical liquids. So because SARMs are still in clinical trials, they're not a pharmaceutical yet. So they are still legal to purchase, but you're purchasing them as a research chemical liquid. So they're not intended for you to be using for bodybuilding purposes, right? So it's legal to purchase, but you're doing illegal things with what you purchased. So it's like that gray area. Luckily, they don't really care about the end user. They care about the source, right? So like, let's say you bought some SARMs. Worst thing they would do is confiscate the package. They care about the person producing the SARMs and selling the SARMs, right? Even with steroids, like cops don't really care about steroids. They care if you're selling steroids. So if you had like a gym bag full, they would prosecute you with intent to sell. But I mean, if a cop found like a couple bottles of Anavar in your gym bag or something, he'd probably just confiscate it, or even he'd just tell you like smarten up or something, right? Like cops don't really care about that.
Sure. So are you still doing modeling right now? I know you haven't competed, but are you still doing modeling?
I'll do the occasional job if it's like a friend of mine or something like, or if it's like a client that I've worked for before. But no, I don't really need the money now. So and it's not something I really enjoy. So I kind of.
What did you typically model? Are we talking like athletic modeling? Or are we talking about like fashion modeling?
No, there's not really any money in athletic modeling. It's more like high fashion, right? So it'd be like suits and things like that. Then also runways. There's a lot of money in that. But all like suiting companies and things like that, they need to update their lookbook every year, right? Mm-hmm. So you would basically model the new suits. So you'd model the new suits, and you would, so like it's a whole ordeal, right? So like, let's say you're wearing the new suit with like the new shirt and everything. First, they would take photos of you with the suit. Then you would take off the suit and just wear the vest. Then you would take off the vest and just wear the shirt. And then they would want close-ups on the pants. And then they want close-ups on like the cufflinks and everything. It's kind of like when you go online and you buy a suit, you scroll through all the photos. You want to see how it looks like with the jacket open, with the jacket closed, just the vest. So like that's kind of the stuff you would do. Okay. There's really no money in athletic modeling.
I wonder why, because you mentioned that, and I'm surprised because you would think, like if you're looking at
free, that's the problem.
What's the problem? Say that again.
Do it for free.
Oh, okay. Everyone will do it for free, so you can't get paid. Basically,
you go to your gym right now. You say, "Hey, I work for Nike. Do you want to be in my photo shoot?" Every single 100%. When is it? Let me know. And that's the problem with social media now, is that people do stuff for free, right? Like if Henry Singer or Harry Rose, went up to an agency and said, "Hey, we want your models for free," the agency would laugh, right? But like with Nike, people in that bodybuilding fitness community, for whatever reason, are so excited they'll do it for free. Mm-hmm. Same thing with supplements. Like you see all these, young guys who are willing to promote these supplement companies for free, and all they get is like $100 of supplements per month.
That's terrible. And because my initial, and as you said, because everybody does it for free, but my initial thing is, well, who's your eye drawn to more? I mean, it would be drawn to someone that's jacked, as opposed to, with their shirt kind of off or whatever, in a tank top, as opposed to like suits, and it seems more exciting, but like you said, there's no money in it for the actual athlete. So
I've done like underwear modeling and swimsuits, but there's not, I don't know why, it's just there's really no money in athletic. I guess the thing is like anyone who's into bodybuilding would do like a Nike photo shoot for free, because like they would want the photos for like their Instagram or things like that. But when it comes to like a swimsuit photo shoot for like Tommy Bahama or something like that, it's just not the same, I guess. Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know
maybe,
why.
Yeah. I wonder also if maybe the companies that we have in supplements and bodybuilding and fitness, don't have as much power, money, but like it seems like these companies that do fashion runways, I mean, they're much bigger. It appears at least that way. They're high elite society,
You have to remember, only about 10% of the population works out, right? But everyone.
That's so sad.
No, like it's actually really sad if you look at the statistics. I think only 20% of North Americans meet the activity recommendations, and the minimum activity recommendations are 30 minutes of activity 3 times a week.
Yeah, that's terrible. And as you were talking about having treating symptoms as opposed to, having conversations of what the root cause is. It seems like you would need to have that conversation years before it gets to the point of you needing that blood pressure medication, needing those medications to bring your levels down.
That's the problem with our society. We wait until failure to make a change, right? Your wife comes home and slaps you with divorce papers, so you finally read a marriage book that you should have read 5 years ago, right? You have a heart attack that was 10 years in the making, right?
Right.
Your kids won't talk to you because you were a terrible father for the last 10 years. Like, these aren't things that happen overnight, but don't think I'm innocent, right? Because we're all busy and it's easy to kind of like look the other way and take things for granted. But one thing I really make an effort with my girlfriend is to not take things for granted and really make sure that she feels appreciated and things like that, because there's so many marriages that end up falling apart just because you take each other for granted. And it's and just something as simple as saying thank you, or saying I love you, or things like that makes all the difference in the world. Like, you don't have to buy her flowers every single day or take her out to a nice restaurant every single night, right? It's just little things like that. So
yeah, I mean, I'm sure she appreciates that. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You were about to say something else.
Are you married?
Yes, 9 years. Going on 10.
So you must know what I'm talking about then.
Yeah, I do. I definitely do. I was gonna switch the subject to like a little bit more on the serious side. I know that you said we were texting back and forth, and you said you ran into some health issues yourself. Can you kind of talk about that? Would that be something you want to discuss?
Yeah. So I was going through a form of endothelial cancer. So I was getting skin tumors, and the nice thing about so whenever you hear cancer, people freak out. What people don't realize is that it's not the cancer that kills you, it's the cancer affecting your organ not being able to function that kills you, right? So let's say you have liver cancer. It's not the cancer that kills you, it's your liver not being able to work that kills you. And that's why certain types of cancer are less severe than other ones, right? If it's the type of cancer, if it's like a muscular form of cancer, you just cut it out and it's not an issue. So I had an autoimmune disease where I was getting these tumors on my skin, and it was really, really weird. Until we figured out what it was really terrifying, because like the doctor was terrified that they were going to spread, and that's the biggest issue with cancer, right? Is you get this small tumor, and that tumor then spreads to your brain or your heart or your kidneys, and then you're dead in a couple of weeks. So luckily we found out what it was, and there is a drug for it. But part of getting diagnosed with cancer was where I became more and more fascinated with nutrition and being able to healing our bodies through proper nutrition and things like that, is because it's getting scary when you think of the amount of chemicals we're putting in our body and just the amount of chemicals in the environment. We're spending 6 billion pounds of glyphosate every year. So glyphosate is the main herbicide in Roundup. And what's really scary about glyphosate is that glyphosate was never patented as a herbicide, it was patented as an antibiotic. So it was genius what Monsanto did, is they went to the FDA and said, this only affects bacteria. It doesn't affect human cells. It's an antibiotic. So the people on the lobbying boards, they're not scientists, right? They were like, oh, that seems genius. Great job,
good.
Monsanto, right? We can sign off on that. What they don't understand is that there's 100 times more genetic information in the bacteria in our bodies than in our own cells. Humans only have 32 billion cells in our DNA. An apple has 3 times more genetic information in its cells than we do, because most of our genetic information is in the bacteria living in our bodies. Only 1% of the proteins our body needs are coded for by our own cells. 99% are coded by the bacteria living in our bodies. And that's why these topics like probiotics and things like that get so exciting. Now, the issue we have is because we're spraying glyphosate on everything, and because we're giving all of our livestock antibiotics, it's in our dairy, it's in our meat, and then everything we're using is antibacterial. If you go in your house, your soap's antibacterial, your mouthwash is antibacterial. We're basically destroying all the bacteria in our bodies. So if there's 100 times more genetic information in the bacteria in our bodies than in our own cells, and we're killing it, then our bodies get so confused, and then what happens is you get all these autoimmune diseases, whether it be rheumatoid arthritis, whether it be autism. Even cancer is an autoimmune disease. Your body's attacking itself. So this is all stuff that I've learned in university and just through my own interest. And if you would have asked me 5 years ago, organic, I'd say that's stupid, stop being a hippie. But the more I research it, the more I realize how important this is. And then also, because glyphosate is an antibiotic, it's killing all the microbes in the soil, and we're killing all of our soil. And what's even worse is that glyphosate is water soluble, so then it gets in the rainwater, it gets in the aqueducts. You can't get rid of this stuff.
So would your suggestion be to, as an individual, to eat only organic foods?
I mean, so again, like, you have to be as realistic as possible. It's like, you're never going to be able to eat only organic, right? I don't want people to, freak out and be at their grandma's house Sunday night for dinner and be like, was this, potato organic? Oh, it's not. I'm sorry, grandma. I can't, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
One thing I did for me and Danelle is I signed us up for a community farm share. So how that works is you actually buy a share in the farm. So it was $1,000, and then every week for 25 weeks they drop off a big box of produce at your door, which is really cool. And every week's different stuff. So we go through it every week, and we're like, oh wow, fennel. Never ate fennel before, but let's figure out how to make it. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of options, like your local farmers markets and things like that. If you go to the grocery store, organic's going to cost you an arm and a leg. But if you go to your farmer's market, if you make relationships with local farmers, it is pretty affordable. And then I really think that there's such a value in getting to know where your food comes from. Even planting like a small garden. I wish I have a condo, so I can't do that. But planting a small garden, actually growing your food, there's something when you actually see where your food comes, you really appreciate it more. And it creates such a better relationship with food. I think part of the problem we have, and part of the problem why we're all mind eating it, we're never actually enjoying the food we eat, and we're always never satisfied, right? And that's why we eat so many calories when we eat, is that we don't really appreciate our food because we're so far removed from it. Right. Most kids don't even know eggs come from chickens, right?
That's ridiculous.
It's actually, so I'm in the Department of Nutrition, right? In the Department of Agriculture. Very interconnected, because obviously they grow the food and then we quantify how much to eat, what to eat, and all those sorts of things. And when we go on these, farm tours with kids, the kids are like, they've never seen a chicken before. You know what I mean? It's like, they're like, when they see a chicken lay an egg, they're like, first they're freaked out. It's almost like they saw an alien, and then they're like super interested and they want to pick the eggs and everything. But I mean, kids have no idea that milk comes from cows and that chicken comes from, an egg comes from a chicken, or that you make bread from flour, or potatoes come from the ground. They just think, oh, you go to the grocery store.
Yeah. Are you a proponent of veganism, vegetarianism, or would you say that's
I'm not.
That's not an idea? You're not. Okay. Can you tell me why?
With everything in life, moderation is key. Right? So is eating primarily plant-based healthy? 100%. Is eating completely plant-based healthy? That's too extreme, because there are certain vitamins like vitamin B12 that you can only get from animal products. And then also, most vegans are deficient in B vitamins, they're deficient in iron. And then collagen, which is found in joints, tendons, and ligaments, is the most abundant protein in the human body. So things like bone broth are super, super beneficial. Or even the skin on salmon or things like that. So I'm a big proponent of eating primarily plant-based, eating lots of fruits and vegetables, but I think some ethically raised animal foods is beneficial for human health, especially fish, and especially keeping the skin on the fish and things like that, or even eating a whole fish like the sardines and eating the bones and everything, because there's so much calcium in there. There's so much good omega-3 fatty acids.
Sure. Do you do personal training, or do you work in that kind of field as well, like give out nutrition advice, training?
I do. My website's trevordietcoach.com. I'm super busy, so I don't take on very many clients anymore. Okay. I used to take on quite a few clients. I'm really interested in bodybuilding, and right now, because I'm not actively pursuing bodybuilding because I'm finishing my PhD, I'm about to marry Danelle and start a family and everything like that, I can kind of live vicariously through them. Right. So I do take on a few clients. I'm really busy, so it's very limited on the amount I can take.
Sure.
But I do enjoy it. It is fun, and especially when you have, like, I really enjoy the client who's excited about it. You know what I mean? Like, nothing upsets me more than someone who bodybuilds and is complaining about how hungry they are and how tired they are when you're doing this out of choice.
Right.
Like I remember when I was competing, and I did a lot of shows before winning my pro card. I've probably done 12, 13 shows, and I was, tired and exhausted. I really reflected on the fact that I'm doing this out of choice, right? Like, no one's sticking a gun to my head. I can go drive to the grocery store and buy whatever I want and eat 10,000 calories if I wanted to, but I'm depriving myself out of choice. There's so many people in this world who are going to bed hungry because that's a reality, right? So when I would actually get really, like, almost emotional the last couple of weeks before my prep. Part of that's because, my hormones are in the tank and everything, but it really made me realize how blessed we are. Like, when we go to the grocery store, there's like 40 different types of rice we can buy. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost ridiculous. You got, like, your short grain, you got your long, like, Danelle's a chef, so she could explain this better to you than I could, but you got, like, it's like, for me, I thought rice was rice. Like, I bought some organic long grain brown rice, but I guess to make rice pudding you need medium grain brown rice, so I had to go buy.
Who would have known?
But anyways, right? But, like, you go to the grocery store, there's, like, sushi rice and long grain and medium grain, and then there's instant rice or parboiled rice or minute. Like, it's ridiculous. And there's so many people in this world who just want a bowl of rice, where we will actually throw out rice because it's not the exact type we like, or it's a day old, or it's really, really hard for me to go to restaurants as you just see the amount of waste. Like, it really breaks my heart.
Yeah, I mean, that's terrible, because a lot of times, like, in the outside of the restaurant by the dumpsters, a ton of food that gets thrown out. I can't remember exact statistic, but I believe I read somewhere it was several times over the earth can actually be fed with the amount of food that are grown in some of the more, I guess, first world countries. But of course, like, other issues come into play, so that doesn't happen. But so if an individual comes to you for like training in diet advice, most of these people are competitive. Is that kind of what we're talking about that you've done?
I'll work with anyone, right? So, like, for me, I just want to work with someone who's serious. Like, because I have limited time, if someone pays me and I send them a diet and they never reply back, that to me is a waste of my time, because I spent 10 hours writing that diet and then they never even followed it. For me, it's not really about the money. It's more about trying to help people. So I've worked with people who, are type 2 diabetic. They're on the verge of dying. And their meal plan was really, really simple. Most of the people who are type 2 diabetic and that unhealthy, they're addicted to sugar. They're addicted to processed food. So for them, it was, like, very, very simple stuff. Like, I want you to start walking 20 minutes a day. No more pop. I'm not a big fan of diet pop, but just, like, as a transition phase, switch all your regular pop to diet pop. Try to cut out the junk food, right? So, like, and junk food's addictive, right? So it's not like with these people you can just tell them, go eat chicken and salad, right? Like, you got to slowly build these habits and things like that. So for them, it was just, emailing back and forth every single day, texting them, teaching them what food is. Because a lot of times they would go to the grocery store and they would want to eat healthy, but they don't even know what to buy, right? So it's kind of like educating them on, shop the perimeter, buy single ingredient food. So if it doesn't have an ingredient list, that's what you should buy. So they would buy, rice and chicken breast and spinach and sweet potatoes and apples, or, like, things that don't have an ingredient list. Or if it does have an ingredient list, it's like one ingredient. It's like chia seeds or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then for the competitors, for them, that's much more complicated, right? So then I'd want photos. I'd want to know when their show is. I'd want to know what their previous history was. Are you natural? Are you not natural? Can you give me blood work? With competitors, you're really trying to push the body to a place it doesn't want to be, right? You want to be as muscular and as little body fat as possible. So you got to be smarter than your body. So I'm a big advocate of blood work and getting baseline blood work so you can see, where is that person's testosterone levels? Are they estrogen sensitive? Are they not estrogen sensitive? Where's their prolactin at? Let's check your cholesterol levels. Like, if someone has, terrible cholesterol, I'd be like, hey, let's get your cholesterol fixed before we pump you full of steroids. Like, I don't want you to die, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, these are all important things to do. And then with them, it's kind of like making an action plan and reverse engineering the show. So if the show is 16 weeks away, what do we need to do now to get you ready in 16 weeks? And my philosophy, one mistake I see competitors make is that they get too aggressive too soon. So if you look pretty good and the show's 16 weeks away, why are you running Tren and Winstrol and Masteron and Halo now, and you're peaking at 10 weeks out? That makes no sense. So I'm often super, super conservative the first, 8, 10 weeks, and the last 6 weeks, but that's the healthiest way, right? So it's like everything's super moderate, but then you're on a lot of drugs for a short period of time, instead of being on a lot of drugs the whole period of time. Drugs like Winstrol and Masteron and Halo, those are cosmetic drugs. There's no need to run them 16 weeks out, right?
Sure.
I know everyone wants to take selfies and post photos on how great you look at 16 weeks out, but there's no point doing that. And you'll actually shoot yourself in the foot, because the body gets used to anything, right? You have one drink of alcohol, do that every day, you're no longer going to feel it. Any drug, the body gets a tolerance to. So if you're starting these drugs at 16 weeks out, they're not going to be as effective as they would be if you started them closer to the show. So that's kind of just like my overview, and then obviously it gets more specific based on the individual. Like if this is someone's first show, very, very minimal drugs, right? Or if it's a female, honestly, for females, I wouldn't even want them using steroids at all. I just have them using SARMs. Mm-hmm. With females, they're very sensitive to androgenic properties. So even something like Anavar, if they run a couple cycles of that, they will start to get some emasculating side effects. So with females, SARMs are much safer all around. And then most females actually carry a decent amount of muscle. With most females, the issue is conditioning. It's not muscle.
So you think just because of their high estrogen level that they retain more water and fat?
Definitely part of it. Estrogen is definitely a huge factor in that. But then also just their physiology, right? Like females are meant to be childbearers. They're meant to have more fat than us. Mm-hmm. And then genetics play a big role, right? Like some women are just naturally very curvy. And to get them lean, it takes a lot of cardio. It takes a lot of suffering. And it's very individual. Like some girls are naturally very thin, but some girls, especially like Latino and Brazilian girls, they're naturally curvy and they're naturally, heavier women. And that's the thing, is we all have different genetics. I'm tall, long limbs. I'm naturally very thin. I will never be Ronnie Coleman. It does not matter how much drugs I take. It does not matter how I train. It does not matter what I eat. I will never be Ronnie Coleman. Same thing. You look at a linebacker on a football field. He could eat nothing but tuna and cucumber, and he will never look like me. He can get really, really lean, but he will never have the limbs I do. Like he will never have the long limbs and insertions that I do. He will never have the X frame I do, because he's a short, stocky guy. Where I'm tall with like very, very long limbs, and I have that X factor, right? So you really got to play with the cards that you're dealt, and that's a big problem with this sport, is that we're all copying each other, right? So someone will ask me what my diet is, but they're 20 years older than me. They have a sedentary, like, you know what I mean? Like they don't have any of the same statistics as me. Or you'll YouTube how to squat. Maybe I'm 5'6" with stocky limbs, and the person in the demonstrational video is 6'2" with long limbs. I should not be setting up my squat the way they do. I have totally different femur lengths. I have totally different, my hips are set up, like, you know what I mean? But like, it's kind of like monkey see, monkey do.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because it's something to a similar principle. I had an older man come up to me to the gym at the gym today. He's 3 weeks away from being 70, and he was telling me about how he's putting on, muscle, wants to put on muscle, and he goes to say, well, I don't want to be, as big as you. Now, I'm about 150 pounds bigger than him and 40 years younger. And I think sometimes people just don't understand the reality of like where they're at. They don't customize their workouts and their nutrition to get to the next level from where they're at. They seem to like want to jump, or even, jump somewhere where they're never going to be,
One thing I always encourage people, and I really think this is the necessity of life, is always question everything, right? And like just being outside the box thinker is like, ask yourself, why am I doing this, right? And it might sound stupid, but like actually look at your workout program and be like, why am I doing this? Does this make sense? And like trust your instinct, right? Like we all know how to squat. Go look at a 3-year-old. They know how to squat. Their form is perfect. We then end up hurting ourselves because we try to overthink things and we fall away from our instincts, right? Like,
So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, finish up.
What I was going to ask you is actually to change a little bit on the subject as far as nutrition. Are you a proponent of keto?
I don't like keto as a long-term diet. Keto was never meant to be a diet. It was meant to be a short-term dietary intervention for type 2 diabetics. So if someone's type 2 diabetic, I think a ketogenic diet for a couple of months is a great dietary intervention, but I do not think keto is a lifestyle. There's a couple of reasons I don't like keto. First of all, never eating carbs again is not realistic. Like, are you never going to eat a potato or a bowl of rice again for the rest of your life? Like, obviously that's ridiculous. And the problem when you label foods as good and bad is that once you finally eat that food, that goes on, right? So let's say you've been doing a keto diet for 5 months, and then you're at your friend's wedding, and then because it's a big, social event and you're the best man at this wedding, you're not going to not eat the rice on the plate, right? So you eat the rice, and then you have this thought in your head like, I screwed up. And then you're like, well, because I ate the rice, I might as well go have some cake and I might as well have some ice cream. And then you binge. And that's the problem with labeling foods as good and bad. There's no such thing as a bad food. There's foods you should not be eating in high quantities. And then again, this is going back to the moderation thing I talked about, is like, do most people consume too many carbs? Yes. Do you need to cut out carbs completely? No. Right? It's like moderation. Just reduce your carbs by maybe 20 to 30%. Especially for athletes, carbs are very important, and you do need some carbs for optimal thyroid production. And then carbs, like a lot of carbs are very healthy. They're very high in fiber, especially if you're eating things like quinoa, if you're eating like sprouted brown rice. There's a lot of nutrients in those foods. So I really don't think that a ketogenic diet is healthy. And then especially the way most people do keto with, bacon and cheese and all that sort of stuff, that much saturated fat is going to put a lot of strain on your cardiovascular system. I don't recommend it.
Sure. So, hey, if somebody wants to get in contact you for any reason, what would be like the best way for them to do that?
Easiest would probably just my website, trevordietcoach.com. If you go on there, I got links to all my social media. There's a contact form there too if you want to send me an email. That would be the easiest way. I think that's how you actually got a hold of me, right?
Yeah, that's it. Well, hey, Trevor, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy, so I won't keep you, much longer. Thanks again.